I'm Craig Bienz. I came to the Klamath Basin in 1979 to work for the Klamath tribes. And then in 1999 I started working for the Nature Conservancy here at Sycan Marsh as the program director. Within Sycan we have a grazing lease with the ZX Ranch, which was a part of the original acquisition, as you well know. And we still have about 7 or 8 years at least in that original lease, going to 2020. We've seen programs where the cattle program has continued to provide for the number of animal unit months that we're managing for here, but at the same time restore the hydrologic function in Sycan Marsh. We're working in the forested uplands as well, and we see those pieces as being very much compatible. As we've made these changes in water management and water control, restoring stream channels, we've seen the biomass of red-band trout increase. We've seen channels narrow. We've seen bull trout express a life history where they're able to move down into the marsh. We've quantified that with using radio telemetry, the different and we've had traps, so we've actually measured these fish moving through to understand more specifically how they're using these habitats. Our yellow rail populations prior to these changes, I think the highest number we ever monitored were 12 to 15 and as low as like 4 and 5 adult males being herd in a year, and now we're looking at 35 to 40 males being herd in a year with these changes in water management. At the same time, we've seen the pregnancy for the cows go from 40 to 60% up to over 90%, is almost 98% I think it was in 2005. And those values then translate into providing the ranch manager with a greater latitude in the animals that he continues to retain or he has to call. $500 as an example, then 500 times 1,000 cows, we're looking at maybe a $5 million a year difference in the exchange, just in the animal benefits for the ranch manager. I think that we still have opportunities to improve on the ecosystem values here with water quality, flows themselves, and especially I'll say in light of the problems that may be expressed through global warming, where we have perhaps changes in precipitation or warming, that these values that we've been able to measure may be enough to offset those increases in either temperature or changes in precipitation. So long-term benefits, I think we may just be on the edge of even breaking through yet another barrier there. That's my thought. In Montana and Wyoming, the Nature Conservancy has been working with the ranching community there, showing similar benefits of the compatibility of grazing programs and managing for the economics of these areas.
Do you think it's ranchers and conservationists putting up with each other, or are they actually becoming partners and finding new ways of doing business that benefit both?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're not adversaries. Yeah. And we are working toward relationships where people will sit down and air their differences in a manner that allows for a constructive step toward a better process. And I think in many ways these relationships between like the Nature Conservancy and ZX Ranch, we have the ability to move to yet another level of communication and understanding and helping out in these different areas. These are complex questions. They're complex processes, and it's not really hard to look through that and say how it all works. But you know, it all works. What I do see, and I guess I have a hope in, our continued working relationships. And so, you know, do we learn more from EcoTrust as we sit here and have this discussion, or does EcoTrust learn more from the Nature Conservancy? And I don't know that I would really measure it. I guess that's my understanding, is we share ideas and understandings and we move forward and make better decisions. It's rich because of the complexity of their own culture, and there's a lot of depth and history and richness of that group of people to this land. and they are waiting for their opportunity to kind of reestablish relationships back to the land, but through the other organizations. And a question you asked earlier regarding the Nature Conservancy working with state and federal agencies, I think the Nature Conservancy's relationship with the Klamath tribes is yet to go to another level, and that's a level of richness that I really look forward to. There was going to be a change in the management at Sycan because of Salgo selling. He would have sold the marsh. He would have sold ZX Ranch. Who might have purchased it had it not been the Nature Conservancy? So there's kind of one set of tracks that could have gone down. The larger scale question is, as we, the Nature Conservancy, have invested into securing the functional processes of Sycan Marsh, being the hydrologic regime, looking at the forested uplands and restoring forest structure and composition and returning fire. We've made huge investments at a time when forest management has actually been going the other direction. Fire management was basically still being excluded from the forests. Cattle grazing was still continuing to use water at a level that basically precluded everybody from getting a sum. And so we've kind of gone from a role where these things have gone toward no forest management, no fire use, grazing being at higher levels with lower economic return, to a situation where more of the land is being recognized for these conservation values, for the functional processes that we're trying to restore, but also then economic returns back to the community and back toward a more holistic approach of looking at the whole watershed and landscape. Had the Nature Conservancy not made that acquisition at that time, I don't believe we would have seen the land remain as a unit. It would have been probably partitioned. The relationships between landowners probably would be more fragmented, as it is in many other parts of the West where the land has been subdivided that way. I don't think we would have a holistic approach of looking at these different regimes that are driving these systems. Yeah, it's possible to see a much different outcome had the Nature Conservancy not acquired Sycan Marsh at that time. We were out this morning and we saw hundreds of sandhill cranes. And when we saw those numbers, even the people that work here, like Mark Hedrick, said, "I can't believe you saw that many birds. We've never seen that many birds before." We have more species here now than we had when the acquisition was made. We have higher numbers of birds and other wildlife species than we had when the acquisition was made. When Sycan Marsh was purchased, they thought the Miller Lake lamprey was extinct. We now have Miller Lake lamprey, the extinct species, on Sycan Marsh. So populations that were thought to not even exist at the time the acquisition was made are found to live here. Mark did some great work here in the early years by doing his master's here, and he actually banded sandhill cranes at that same time. Those same birds, in fact, there's a pair of those that are right over behind you. That's generally where I find them. And when I call Mark every year, in fact, they're over there. I can see them on the other side right now of the meadow. Those birds are the same banded birds that he marked 25 years ago. When we look at our species of wildlife, of birds, we don't find anything like this anyplace else. To my knowledge, there isn't another Sycan Marsh anyplace else. Sycan Marsh is unique in the world in that it's a high elevation. We're over 5,000 feet here, and it's a wetland system that's pristine in many ways as we've gone through these restoration strategies. That's a working ranch. In many places where you try to bring the combination of ranch and high elevation, which is maybe more fragile, and wetland systems together, we see degradation. In our situation, we've seen enrichment, we've seen productivity, and we've actually seen a return of economic value to the community and to the ranch. It only took us 5 minutes.